아, 안녕하십니까. 1, 2분 후에 오신다고 하니까 조금 정리를 했으면 좋겠습니다. I supposed to talk in English this afternoon, but I guess everybody feels better in Korean. So at the beginning of this conference, I should talk to you in Korean. So 조금만 있으면 오신다고 하니까 잠시 되겠다. 우리 학생들은 잉글리시에서 문제 없죠? Everybody understands English? Good. Very good. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak Korean, so we must accept English speaker. 준비되셨습니까? 아직 아닙니까? 네. 오늘 여기 사진 찍으시는 기자분들 많이 오셨는데요. 강의 중이라든가 강의 끝나고 난 뒤에 Q&A 세션 할 때 그 기자분들은 이제 사진을 전문으로 하시니까 찍으시는 건 괜찮은데 학생분들 그 핸드폰으로 띡띡 하는 거 조금 자제해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 물론 사진을 한번 이 순간을 사진으로 남기고 싶은 마음은 있으시겠지만은 강의 중이라든가 Q&A 할 때 이렇게 혼돈이 오니까 좀 사진 촬영을 좀 자제해 주시기 바랍니다. L5에 대해서 다 오신 분들은 다 준비하고 오셨죠? 우리 학생들 다 읽고 오셨죠? L5에 대해서. L5가 무슨 상품 이름 아닙니다. 8년 동안 미국 부통령을 했죠. 빌 클린턴 대통령과 함께 부통령을 8년 동안 했습니다. 그리고 나중에 얘기하겠습니다만 2007년에는 노벨 평화상을 받았죠. 그보다도 더 중요한 건 2000년도 부시와 선거할 때 플로리다주 선거 재검했는데 재검 상황이 상당히 안 좋다는 걸 알고 그냥 이 선거인단 선거로 밀어붙여서 대통령 자리를 놓쳤던 안타까운 일이 있었죠. 그 중간에 재검하는 과정에 미국의 대법원에서 그냥 판결을 그렇게 내려서 할 수 없이 받아들였던 대통령 될 뻔한 했던 부통령이십니다. 이번에 제주 포럼에 오셨다가 오늘 저녁에 미국으로 가셔야 되는데 그 사이에 우리 중앙대학교 김창수 총장님께서 능력을 발휘해서 낚아채신 것 같아요. 다른 대학이 못 뺏어 가도록 그냥 우리 대학에서 하신 것 같고 학생 여러분들은 아마 이런 기회가 많지 않을 거라 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 좋은 기회인데 오늘 이 자리에는 400명을 수용할 수 있는데 옆방에도 지금 사람들 들리고 있습니까? 옆방에 들립니까? 옆방에 들리는지는 모르겠는데 들리기를 바랍니다. 그 400명 수용방에 1200명이 신청을 하셨어요. 학생 여러분들이. 그래서 과감하게 정리를 해서 오늘 오신 분들은 로또 맞았습니다. 로또 맞아서 오신 분들이에요. 제가 우리 공공인재학부 학생들 중에 거기 가냐고 그랬더니 잘렸어요. 그런 애들이 많았어요. 그래서 오늘 여러분 오신 분들 아주 운이 좋은 분들이라 생각합니다. 이런 기회가 많지 않습니다. 사실은 세계적인 저명 인사를 우리 학교에 직접 와서 이렇게 만날 수 있는 기회 많지 않아서 학생 여러분들이 인생에서 큰 영감을 얻는 기회가 되길 바랍니다. 아이고 편하네요. 한국말 하니까. 그 따라오신 분 혹시 통역이 되는 분이 계시면 그냥 한국말로 하고 통역하라면 좋을 텐데 그렇죠? 자, 거의 오십니까? 네. 들어오시기 전에 뭐 긴급한 질문 없으시죠? 네. 있어도 말 못 하시겠죠. 네. 오늘 이 자리엔 우리 교수님들 많이 오셨어요. 사실 오시라고 그러지도 않았는데 다들 오셨어요. 우리 저 문태훈 저 도시 및 지역계획학과 교수님, 저 환경정책의 대한민국 대가분 저 앉아 계시네요. 잘 오셨습니다. 예, 아유, 관심이 많으신 분들, 그 기후 변화에 대해서 관심이 많으신 분들 다 오신 것 같고 바쁜 시간에도 와주셔서 감사합니다. 네, 질문하십시오, 백훈 교수님. 강의 내용이 녹화가 되지 않겠? 녹화되죠? 예, 강의 내용이 녹화가 되고 있어서 나중에 아마 볼 수 있죠, 학교에서? 예, 그렇습니다. 어디에 제공이 되는지는 제가 우리 학교 홈페이지에서 제공되겠죠? 네? 중앙대학교 홈페이지에 아마 걸릴 것 같습니다. 네. 그럴 때 그 사회자 멘트는 넣지 말기 바랍니다. 방송국 어디서 오셨습니까? KBS에서 오셨고 MBC에서 오셨고 또 어디서 오셨어요? 네. 아, CNN, 예, CNN도 오셨군요. 예. 어서 이 반갑습니다. 어서 오세요. 예. 자, okay, dear students and professors, ladies and gentlemen, here comes former Vice President of US, Al Gore. Please welcome him with a big applause. Yes, good afternoon, students and professors. My name is Yun Won Hwang, the Dean of Graduate School of Public Administration. I am very much honored to moderate this session. This moment, we are inviting Mr. Al Gore as part of our university's centennial year celebration events. Before we hearing his insightful lecture, our university president will give a welcoming address. We all know that his excellent leadership is making our university go forward to a brighter future. He works so hard with his team, all teams, vice presidents and staffs, day and night, and we all appreciate it very much. Student professors, let's welcome President Kim Chang-soo of this university.
Distinguished guests and students of Chungang University and fellow professors, good afternoon. I am Chang-soo Kim, as you know, the president of Chungang University. Today, we have a very special guest visiting our school for a special lecture. And I'd like to kick off today's event with a quick opening remark. A couple days ago, I saw on the news that we are experiencing the hottest May in 85 years. The thing is, we often see similar headlines stating that we are experiencing the worst flood, more frequent typhoons, and extreme heat. And many say this is due to climate change. This makes me to believe that climate change is no longer a problem of the future, but an immediate issue. Nonetheless, the international society has made some tangible progress from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement. Kyoto Protocol has promoted to develop clean and sustainable technology to reduce carbon emissions. And we have seen that the economic development is possible without increasing carbon emission. Further, the Paris Agreement was established to promote both the mitigation and the adaptation of climate change. Climate change is definitely a risk to our society, but we are embracing the issue and trying to turn this into an opportunity. And Korea is no exception to this. We are transitioning to a low carbon society and seeking to take more roles in the international community. We hosted the headquarters of the Green Climate Fund, and there will be more jobs and business opportunities in the field. So, Korea will require bright minds like our students here at Chungang University to become the leaders of low carbon world. I hope you get inspired and motivated from the champion of climate change today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Al Gore, the former Vice President of the United States and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Please welcome him to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is a great honor to be here, and I am very grateful for the introduction. And it is a particular honor to take part in your centennial year celebrations. I know the actual anniversary is next year, but you're wise to start the celebrations now, because it will take at least a full year to do justice to this great milestone. But thank you very much, Mr. President. I have enjoyed learning more about Chungang University, and it is wonderful to visit this beautiful campus. I hope to also visit on my next visit to the campus just 50 kilometers from here. I know they have been put together seamlessly. And so to all of you, thank you for your attention. I'm going to talk to you about climate, the climate crisis. You'd be surprised if I didn't talk to you about climate. There are only 3 questions. Oh, wait a minute. Before I go on, I want to acknowledge that there are 10 climate reality leaders who have gone through my training program. Could I have you raise your hands, the 10 of you? Thank you so much. These are climate ninjas. They give the slideshow and talk with people, so thank you for what you're doing. There are only 3 questions that need to be asked about the climate crisis. Number 1, must we change? Do we really have to stop using fossil fuels? We get 83% of all the energy used by the world from fossil fuels still. And in Korea, it is even more than that, a little bit more than that. So naturally, this first question is one that many people still sometimes ask. Do we really have to change? I'm going to give you the answer to that question, which comes from the scientific community, but the answer coming from Mother Nature is even more powerful, and I will give you some examples. Some of the examples can be hard to listen to, but don't get depressed, because even though there is great danger in the climate crisis, the answers to the second and third questions are very positive and hopeful. The second question after must we change is can we change? And the answer to that question, as I will describe to you, is incredibly positive. Yes, we can. And the answer 10 years ago was not as clear. But now the answer is very clear. Yes, we can change. We have the tools we need. We have the solutions available. The third and final question is the most important one. Will we change? Because sometimes in our personal lives and certainly in our civilization, even if we know we have to change and we know we can change, we don't necessarily always change. But this time, I think the answer to that third question is also positive. Yes, we will change. And the Paris Agreement, mentioned earlier, is the most hopeful sign that the entire world, with very few exceptions, Syria didn't sign the agreement. They have their hands full right now. Nicaragua, a tiny country, said it didn't go far enough. Every other nation in the world agreed. Now, I know what you're thinking. President Trump is now in the midst of deciding whether he will pull the U.S. out of the agreement. I don't know what his decision will be. I don't know why it's a difficult choice, but he will announce his decision tomorrow. But it won't change the answer to that third question, because the United States of America is going to continue reducing global warming pollution no matter what President Trump decides. Large states like California and New York and many others are now already moving faster than the commitments of President Obama a year ago, December, in Paris. Many cities have decided to go 100% renewable. I just came this morning from Jeju Island, where they have decided to go 100% renewable. Anybody here from Jeju? I know that you are, yes. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, well, it's a beautiful island. You should go to the beaches there. And large businesses in the U.S. and many small and medium-sized businesses have decided to go 100% renewable. Apple, Google, Microsoft, there are many, many businesses that are now moving very rapidly. So let me go back to the beginning and deal with the first question. Do we have to change? Well, the scientific community has been nearly unanimous for decades now. And by the way, the head of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is now Korean, and the thousands of scientists in the IPCC have been all but unanimous. The latest measurement of the peer-reviewed studies are that 99.9% of them agree with the consensus. And it's easy to see why. Because we are now putting into the sky every day 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution, principally CO2. And this greenhouse gas pollution traps a lot of heat energy. One of the reasons why it took more time than maybe it should have to recognize this danger is that we have had a popular misconception about the nature of the sky. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you go outside and look up at the sky, it looks like it is endless. It looks like a vast and limitless space. But the scientists have long known what we see clearly in pictures brought back from space by the astronauts and cosmonauts. The sky is actually a very thin shell of atmosphere surrounding the planet. My dear friend, the late Carl Sagan, used to say, if you had a large globe with a coat of varnish on it, the thickness of that varnish relative to the globe is similar to the thinness of the atmosphere relative to our planet. If you could drive a car straight up in the air at normal speeds, you would get to the top of the sky in only 5 or 10 minutes. It's a very thin space. So when we put 110 million tons of heat-trapping pollution into that thin space every 24 hours, it builds up. Some of that pollution that we put up there today will still be there 1,000 years from now. Not all of it. Some of it falls out more quickly. And some of you will be better at doing the complicated mathematics that describe how quickly what percentage comes out. But some of it's 15, 20% will still be there 1,000 years from now. And it traps heat energy. You already know that the energy comes into the Earth from the sun as light waves. It heats up the planet, and then infrared waves, a longer wavelength, goes back out into space, and some of that is trapped by the atmosphere, and the natural greenhouse gas layer is extremely beneficial. It's what keeps the temperatures on our planet within an ideal range for the life forms that have evolved here, including us. But when we thicken that layer of greenhouse gases as much as we have, much more of the outgoing infrared is trapped. How much more? Well, let me give you statistic. The accumulated man-made global warming pollution that is there now traps as much extra heat energy every day as the amount of heat energy that would be released by the explosion of 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs every 24 hours. Now think about that for a minute. It's a big planet, but that's an enormous amount of energy. And it is causing the temperatures on Earth to go up very rapidly. The 16 of the 17 hottest years ever measured with instruments have been since 2001, and it's 2017. The hottest of all was last year. The second hottest was the year before. The third hottest was the year before that. One of our television comedians in the United States said recently, the way you know global warming is real is if the hottest year ever measured is the year you're currently living in. And that has been true more often than not. So we see the consequences of this heat in heat waves, the effect on food crops. Heat stress reduces crop yields. This is a growing concern for the agricultural scientists. The extra heat also moves mosquitoes into new areas, and ticks, and tropical diseases are spreading to higher latitudes. Air travel has made that problem worse. But when you step back and look at the global nature of this issue, there is another surprise compared to conventional wisdom. 93% of all of this extra heat energy that's trapped in the Earth's system goes into the oceans, which cover the majority of our planet. And the ocean of the world is a little bit like a big battery. It fills up with energy, but then the energy comes back out again. But the heating of the oceans has already had some major consequences. And I'm not just talking about the danger of losing all of our coral reefs, although that's certainly underway. You know, the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia is now dying. The reefs of Hawaii and the Caribbean and the Pacific, they're all in jeopardy now. But the heating up of the oceans also makes the ocean-based storms much stronger, because typhoons, and in the southern Pacific they call them cyclones, in my part of the world they call them hurricanes. They're all the same phenomena, they just have different names in different oceans. But these storms gather their energy and their wind speeds get stronger when they go over warmer water. Think for a moment, just 2 years ago, about what happened in the Philippines with Super Typhoon Haiyan, which they call Yolanda in the Philippines. It crossed areas of the Pacific 3.5 degrees warmer than normal, and it became the most powerful destructive storm ever to make landfall. More than 4 million people were made homeless in that storm, and thousands were killed. In my country, just not much earlier than the typhoon that hit the Philippines, Superstorm Sandy hit New York City and New Jersey and shut down much of the city. There are many examples, but the typhoons in the northern Pacific that pose danger to Korea and Japan and China are also getting stronger. But there is a second consequence of heating up the oceans that is already having a big impact on people all over the world. It is disrupting the water cycle. And when you were much younger, and when I was much, much younger, we all learned in school about the water cycle, the hydrological cycle. Water evaporates off the oceans, and then it comes over the land and falls as rain or snow in winter, and then the water works its way back to the sea. Well, this enormous increase in ocean energy content is dramatically increasing the evaporation of water vapor off the oceans. Average humidity worldwide has gone up already 5%, and some scientists are saying that it's even more than that. And that's not a small number, because what it means is enormous amounts of water vapor are being carried over the land masses, and the concentration of water vapor is so great now that when storm conditions release a downpour, we get these massive rain bombs, they're called, with lots of precipitation falling at the same time. And this is causing more floods and more mudslides. Just yesterday in Sri Lanka, so many hundreds of people killed, so many thousands of people made homeless. Almost every day now, I have a large personal staff where I live in the United States that goes through the news in every country every day. And it is getting worse. And these climate-related extreme weather events are becoming stronger, more destructive, and much more frequent. Now, the same extra heat that is causing these downpours and floods also is causing the droughts. And of course, Korea is now in a drought today. And for the last several years, the entire Korean peninsula has been hit by drought. And many areas are hit by unusually long and deep droughts. And this has caused major problems for people and for economies. So when the land dries out, the vegetation dries out, and we get more fires. In Siberia, that's been a particular problem. In North America, in Australia, in Africa, there have been enormous fires. They're now called mega fires. And this is yet another sign that we are disrupting the natural world. I mentioned the interaction of the heat energy with the ocean, but I want to mention another aspect that is sometimes overlooked, and that is what the scientists call the cryosphere, the frozen, ice-covered regions of the world. Of course, the mountain glaciers are disappearing all over the world, but more consequentially, the large masses of ice on Greenland and on top of Antarctica are now melting much more rapidly. And this is leading to catastrophic sea level rise. It has been increasing slowly, it's beginning to increase, but the new figures show that the scientific predictions for this century could be 2 to 3 meters of sea level rise. With an increase of just 2 degrees Celsius, 1 million people would be displaced in Korea. With an increase of 4 degrees, 4 million people would be displaced here. And some areas are already experiencing this. The low-lying islands in the Pacific Ocean and the Bay of Bengal. Kiribati has already purchased land elsewhere to move its entire population. In Bangladesh, tens of millions of people live in the low-lying delta areas. And many of the great cities of our world are in low-lying areas near the shores of the ocean. The cities most at risk are largely concentrated in Asia when you look at the populations at risk. If you look at the assets at risk, the number one city is Miami, Florida, in my country. Last year I went to both Greenland, where I watched the ice melting. I've been to Antarctica twice. I've been to Greenland twice. What I saw on this trip was very different from years past. The melting has increased dramatically. Then I went to Miami, and on a sunny day with no rain for weeks, I saw fish from the ocean swimming in the streets of Miami because it was a high tide. It was a king tide. It was one of the highest high tides of the year. But Miami is one of many cities in the world that will have to relocate millions of people. Yesterday in Hawaii, in Honolulu, the same thing happened. I could show you the pictures, but I'm not going to show slides today. Fish from the ocean swimming in some of the streets of Honolulu. I could give you Mumbai, Kolkata, Guangzhou, parts of Shanghai. The list is a very long one. I mentioned tropical diseases. I want to say one other word about that. Last year in my country, we had fears related to the Zika virus. And as some of you know, the birth defects associated with this virus are horrendous. And it's a sexually transmitted virus, the first mosquito-borne virus that has both of those qualities, birth defects and sexually transmitted. I heard doctors in parts of South America and Central America say something I've never heard in my life. They warned women in those regions, don't get pregnant for 2 years until we try to get a handle on this medical emergency. A warning like that, when heard for the first time in human history, should set off alarm bells. We are disrupting the natural world that has given rise to the flourishing of humanity. We must change. And I haven't even mentioned ocean acidification or the destruction of infrastructure. The cost of carbon is too high. We must change. Second question, can we change? Here's where the good news comes in. There are some areas of technology that respond to research and development by coming down sharply in cost, even as the quality improves. And those same areas of technology, when they are implemented in the marketplace and begin to scale, they come down even faster in cost. We've seen this with computer chips. We've seen it with flat screen TVs. We've seen it with mobile phones. 25 years ago, I bought one of the first mobile phones. Well, it's been longer ago than that. Let's see, it's probably 30 years ago. I bought one of the first mobile phones, and it was a big, clunky phone. And I couldn't wait to show my friends. It was so cool. You could talk on the phone while you were walking around. I know this sounds like gibberish to your generation, but that's what it was like. And now we can have a supercomputer in our pocket. And now there are more cell phone contracts in the world than there are people in the world. What a dramatic change. Well, here's the good news. Solar photovoltaic panels and windmills are behaving the way cell phones and computer chips and flat screen TVs behave. It's coming down in cost more rapidly than anyone thought was possible. And now the cost of the electricity from solar and wind in many regions of the world is cheaper than electricity from burning coal or gas. We are now seeing some dramatic developments as nations deploy this new renewable energy technology. And we're not going to run out of it, by the way. We get as much energy from the sun in 1 hour as the entire world economy uses for a full year. So when we improve the fraction of that energy that we can profitably harvest and use, then we can stop burning fossil fuels. And by the way, there are a lot of other reasons to stop burning fossil fuels. If you have asthma, or if you respond to air pollution the way so many people do, you know, it's terrible. And people all over the world are recognizing it. And has anybody here ever seen one of those new monitors that measures 2.5 ppm pollution? Show of hands, who's used one of those? Anybody? Okay, if I asked that question in China, half the hands would go up. People are now empowered to monitor the air pollution. So there are lots of reasons why people want to change. And as I say, it's very exciting that we can change. Wind power. In my country, there are now states where the utilities will give you all the electricity you can possibly use from 9 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock the next morning for free, because they have so much of it. Now, it is still being deployed, and there is resistance to the change on the part of some of the fossil fuel companies, but this is a temporary political obstacle. I've mentioned renewable energy, but I should also mention electric vehicles, and they're spreading very rapidly, and the thousands of new efficiency technologies. You've studied the Industrial Revolution, you've studied the Agricultural Revolution, you've been living through the digital revolution. I want to tell you about the sustainability revolution, which is now sweeping the world. We're in the early years of a revolution called the sustainability revolution that has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution. And instead of starting in one corner of England in a world of 1.5 billion people and then slowly spreading to Western Europe and North America, this sustainability revolution is being jump-started in developing and developed countries all over the world, in a world of 7.4 billion people, and it's gaining speed. And businesses and industries are learning how to use the new digital tools, including the Internet of Things, to make their processes far more efficient than was ever possible in the past. They're beginning to implement artificial intelligence to help manage the flows of information on the Internet of Things and in other ways, to make buildings more efficient, to make factories more efficient. You know, we've gone for 3 years in a row now with no increase in global warming pollution. We've gone for 3 years in a row with China reducing coal use, the US reducing coal use. It's not good enough, because the annual emissions are still adding to that accumulated total. We have to start bringing them down dramatically. So that leads to the final question. After we know that we must change, and we now have the tools and we can change, will we change? I already mentioned the Paris Agreement, but there was also an agreement 1 year before that between the US and China. There have been movements by many countries around the world, and students are helping to lead this revolution. It is very inspiring to me that young people like these 10 that I'm particularly proud of, but like many of you who are doing things to help move this revolution forward. Let me tell you a quick story from my childhood when I was much younger than you are now. When I was 13 years old, I listened to President John F. Kennedy make a speech when he issued the challenge of putting a person on the moon and bringing him back safely in 10 years. And I remember adults in that day saying, that's a terrible idea. It's a waste of money. We probably won't be able to do it anyway. But then 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the surface of the moon. And in the moment he did so, at NASA's Mission Control in Houston, Texas, there was a great cheer that went up. And the average age of the systems engineers in that room was 26. Which means, among other things, that their average age when they heard that challenge was 18. And they changed their lives. And they studied courses that would enable them to be a part of accomplishing that historic mission. And young people all over the world today know that this challenge must be met successfully. And they are changing their lives. And I hope that some of you will as well. Some of you already are. We need you to help lead this sustainability revolution and solve the climate crisis. It is in the great tradition of the moral causes that have improved humanity. All of them, if you look at the movement to abolish slavery, the movement to lift up the rights of women, the movement called the Civil Rights Movement in my country, or the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, more recently the gay rights revolution in my country and in many countries. All of these movements have met with ferocious resistance from people who said, no, no, no. But all of them succeeded. Nelson Mandela, the late Nelson Mandela once said, it's always impossible until it's done. A great economist named Rudy Dornbush once said, things take longer to happen than you think they will. And then they happen much faster than you thought they ever could. True in technology, true in the human heart. And what all of these revolutions have had in common is that ultimately the central question was resolved into a simple choice between right and wrong. And we know that once that choice is so defined, the outcome is foreordained because of who we are as human beings, 99% of us anyway. And that is the point the climate movement has reached. One of the great poets in my country, Wallace Stevens, in the last century, wrote a line of poetry that goes like this: after the last no comes a yes. And on that yes, the future world depends. We have had a lot of people saying, no, we don't have to change the pollution of the earth. No, we can't solve the climate crisis. No, we won't solve the climate crisis. But now we are getting to the yes. I'll just close before your questions by saying that if anyone doubts that we have the political will as humans to save ourselves and to solve this crisis, always remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much. Thank you.
My goodness. Mr. President, have you ever have this kind of response from the
Very
audience?
heartening. I appreciate that
Right,
response.
right. That's Korean, young Koreans.
Yeah.
Okay, now, before we get into
That's
the...
because you're educating them well.
Thank you. Before we get... Before we get into Q&A session, I should give you some of the information that we must have about him. But I have one question to you. Did you, before you left Jeju Island, did you notice that it was raining, heavily raining in Seoul?
In Seoul? Really?
Right.
This morning?
Right.
I did not know that.
Storms with winds, strong winds. All of a sudden, well, when we heard that you coming here to our university.
And the skies cleared.
Right.
Well, you're
It
welcome.
stopped.
You're welcome.
It stopped. I was wondering, I see. Now we're going to have a climate change expert. Yes. But he's not anymore a climate change expert. He is And he is going to become climate controller. So, well, anyway, I'm so glad to see you here.
Thank
with
you.
bright suns. All right. As I said, Mr. Al Gore. Al Gore is a special gentleman who was once almost the president of the U.S. It's pity, huh? The reason I'm saying is this because in the year 2000, as everybody remembers, everybody in the world, including Koreans, wondered and regretted how 48.4% of direct votes was defeated by 47.9% in the US presidential election. It's interesting, right? 48 is bigger than 47, but he was defeated. Well, that was American unique political system, I guess. But
Now in Korea, does the person with the most votes win?
yes, everywhere in the world.
Does that work okay?
Yes. Right.
I've always been curious.
But this candidate Al Gore, gently accepted the Supreme Court decision in spite of angry supporters' disobedience, showing all that was humanly possible. I assume that his acceptance meant not simply a well-mannered respect to a unique American political system, but his high standard of understanding and broad-minded leadership that we admire so much. I am not religious person, but I guess that was the God's calling for him to be rather a super global leader, not just one country leader. As a result, up until now, he stands up as high as possible as an influential and strong and powerful global leader, winning Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, without telling you every accomplishment, he did so many things, but I only give you two things about him. Former US president for 2 terms, 8 years, and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Bearing this information in mind, please get into a Q&A journey now. Does anybody have any questions? Please raise your hands. 정수빈? You 정수빈, right? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your wonderful lecture. I'm Evan from Department of English Language and Literature, and today I've been really forward to asking several questions to you. But I chose one that I have been asking to myself for some time, ever since I got interested in the preservation of environment. As you know, we're now facing the 4th Industrial Revolution. And under this era of revolution, we are expecting a lot of innovation and technology. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that such development affects our environment. So what do you suggest as a former politician and an environmentalist that we do in order to achieve both goals, namely the development of the technology and the preservation of our environment? Thank you.
Well, thank you for a very thoughtful question. As the university president said earlier, we have already learned that we can increase economic progress while reducing emissions. There used to be a linkage between energy use and economic growth. That has now been broken. And there are many reasons for it, but one reason is that information and computing technologies have given us new tools to become much more efficient in the use of energy and the management of electricity and the management of waste streams and in the construction of circular economy loops so that the waste becomes inputs for the next cycle. And in some industries, that's already beginning to happen. You used the phrase the fourth industrial revolution, and I'm quite familiar with that, of course, but I think of it a little bit differently myself. I think that we are now in an unprecedented period of multiple simultaneous revolutions that challenge our ability to keep up with the change, but also our ability to manage, anticipate and manage some of the consequences of these technologies. We've talked about information technologies and energy technology, but think about biology. The sequencing of genomes, the first human genome cost $3 billion US to sequence. Now it can be done for $200. And soon it will be done for $10. The cost down curve, where you know about Moore's law, where the computer chips, the number of transistors on a chip doubles. Effectively, the computer chips drop in cost by 50% every 1.5 to 2 years or so. The cost down curve for the sequencing of genomes is now plummeting 8 times faster than Moore's law. So how do we keep up with the new possibilities created? We are not far from the day that we will go to see the doctor for some complaint or to ask some question, and a part of the routine examination will be to sequence our genome. It will be so cheap that it will be just, you can go down to the drugstore and get it done. I mean, we can't do it now, but we're not far away from that. But these new technologies bring with them new choices. The recent advances in plenipotent stem cell research opens the possibility of real cloning of human beings. It's not here now, but it opens the possibility of trait selection, which could be here now. It's not being done because it's considered unethical. Actually, in some rare cases where genetic diseases can be avoided, it is being done. But do we yet have the wisdom to manage our way through such choices? We're seeing many other revolutions. We don't have time to go through them. But to return to the central thrust of your question, I believe that solving the climate crisis is the key to creating the new global consciousness of our shared human destiny that will enable us to work together across national boundaries and continents to be more effective and thoughtful in accumulating the wisdom that we need for the challenging decades ahead. As you get older, by the time you're my age, these decades in front of us will be a test of humanity's courage and character. The damage done by the climate crisis can be limited. We still have time to avoid the most catastrophic effects, but some continuing damage will occur. and some new dangers will loom on the horizon, we have to have strong hearts, and we have to work together, and we have to call upon the wisdom of Korea and the US, China and Japan, the people of every nation, in pursuit of common values. And I think that solving the climate crisis is the way we'll get there. Sorry to be so long in my answer, but you asked a
Okay,
thoughtful
okay.
question.
Next. Okay, over there. Right, guys. Identify yourself first.
Okay.
Are you a student of Chungang University?
Yes, I am.
good.
My name is Youngjin Kim, and I'm majoring in economics at Chungang University. And thank you for the wonderful lecture today. To first comment a bit on your lecture, as a person who was born and raised in Miami, it was so depressing to hear the news. And I appreciate your recognition of the youth and the role of students in sustainability revolution. So my question is, many expert groups, and including yourself, Mr. Vice President, state that it is essential to solve the problems of the climate change for the future generations. It is not for the current situation, but it's for the future generations.
No,
However,
I didn't say that, by the way.
not today's lecture, but many expert groups.
No, it's present now.
Okay. Well, I also believe that it is the problem of the present situation
Also,
and the future generations.
Yeah.
But the future generations who are present at this hall today don't have equal representation when it comes to climate negotiations. So my question was, I was present at the COP18th at Qatar, and I saw many students who are working to raise their voice and have representation in the final decision of the COP. However, we did not have equal representation and we couldn't reflect much. So I wish to hear from your insights, how can we increase our voice and how can we have more representation when it comes to climate change negotiations?
that's a great question. And when I was your age, I felt exactly the same way about a lot of things. And of course, part of the answer is that it is human nature for people to sometimes pay more attention to those who have lived more years and gained experience. We all know that, it's obvious. But I have seen many examples in my political career. I'm now a recovering politician. And the longer I go without a relapse, the less likely one becomes. But I have seen many examples of young people, your age and even younger, who have found ways to have a dramatic impact. One of the keys is to learn about the particular challenge that you're undertaking to the point where you have confidence that you know as much about it as anybody you're going to be dealing with. And then match it with your passion, not in an overly exuberant way that sometimes is characteristic of young people. It was of me when I was young, but in a measured way. And if you master the subject, then learn also ways to communicate effectively. I mentioned these moral revolutions of the past, civil rights revolution in my country and the others I mentioned. In almost every one of those movements, young people, again your age and younger, were in the vanguard of leading those movements. And while, as I mentioned before, it is human nature sometimes to give more deference and respect and pay more attention to those who have lived many more years, it is also true that sometimes young people, when confronted with a moral choice that is crystal clear, are sometimes less encumbered by the barnacles that come with age the bad habits of thought, the prejudices, the false beliefs that sometimes accumulate in our culture and accumulate with age. And sometimes young people will see a problem that seems complicated to somebody my age, but because you're seeing it with fresh eyes, you say, well, this is clearly right and this is clearly wrong. I mentioned gay rights earlier.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I should mention that or not, because different countries are different. But in my country, if somebody had asked me, if somebody had told me 6 or 7 years ago that in the United States of America in the year 2017, gay marriage would be legal in all 50 states and would be accepted and honored and celebrated by 2/3 of the American people, I would have said, I hope so, because I have many gay friends. But I don't think that's possible. But it happened. And young people led the way. And I remember 6 or 7 years ago when this change was beginning in the US, where people say, oh, they're born that way, there's a genetic basis, that God could not have intended people to be persecuted all their lives for the way God made them. I remember when that change first started, and I would ask some of my friends my age, what do you think about gay marriage? Oh, I don't know. And I would ask my grandchildren, and they say, what's the problem? This is pretty simple, Granddad. That is an example of a moral clarity that rises up in a new young generation. So learn about it, study about it, find your passion, be respectful but persistent, and you can play the kind of role that you wish to.
Okay.
Thank you
I
very
have
much.
further questions, but I think that there are more students who want to ask questions because it's a rare case for us to have him here. So I want to give more chances, more students to ask questions. Would you please, I have the control, Mr. President, I have the control you from now on.
Yeah,
Not too long
are you saying I have to make
answers.
my answers shorter?
Right,
Okay.
thank you, thank you. Okay, Jinsu Park is, where is Jinsu Park? I think, right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. GORE, Vice President, for your lectures. My name is Jinsu Park. I am a senior at Zhongyang University majoring in economics. And since I watched your movie, An Inconvenient to Choose, in 2006, I always dreamed to be another Al Gore.
My goodness, yes.
You are my hero in my life.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
Good.
You made my day. Tell everybody about my trip here.
Last year, I had the opportunity to live in Chinese desert. There, I was able to meet a lot of villagers who have to leave their hometown due to the climate change.
Yeah.
And I learned that climate change will continue to impact our lives. To do what can I do, I started Korean climate change podcast. In the beginning, I hope that many people will change their behaviors and perspective. But not long afterward, I realized that climate change can never become someone's priority unless they have direct influence of climate change. So I'd like to ask you this question. In order to motivate the political willingness, in order to motivate the political willingness that you mentioned before, how should climate change be explained to people who do not have a first-hand experience of climate change,
Yeah.
so that they are willing to take the burden and the cost of the climate change?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Well, it's a very thoughtful question. Thank you, and thank you for your kind words earlier. You already know that one of the ways we human beings learn most effectively is through stories. And if you have not experienced something personally, you can experience it at a deep level when you hear a story about someone who has personally gone through it. And so I have learned in my own efforts to communicate about the climate crisis the importance of telling stories and shaping people's understanding by inviting them to put themselves in the place of those who have already actually experienced these events. So I hope that answers your question. I would answer it at more length,
Right.
but
Sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, that was a good question, but don't expect
Could you give me
longer case. Okay.
could you give me a little advice for our
follow-up
podcast?
Advice, podcast. Okay, any advice for his podcast? To be a role model, to be a podcast for him?
So you mean story is important, right?
yes, I think telling stories is important.
Right.
But also don't get discouraged.
Right.
This problem is difficult to communicate to others because it's complicated. It plays out over a time span that we are not normally comfortable dealing with. It manifests itself on a global scale that we are not normally used to dealing with. And the solutions until recently have seemed very, very inaccessible and difficult and expensive. Now that the solutions really are here, that opens more doors. And over time, people are able to understand that we face a global threat that we must confront. You know, this is a collision between human civilization as it's currently organized and the surprisingly fragile ecological system of the planet.
Okay.
We have quadrupled human population in less than 100 years. We have magnified the powers of the technologies at our disposal 1 million times over. And so the impact of 7.4 billion people with technologies far more powerful than our grandparents could have dreamed of is having an impact on the ecological system. And the most vulnerable part is this thin shell of atmosphere. It's not the only one. Forests are being destroyed. The oceans are being acidified and overfished and polluted. And I could go through a number of similar examples. But
Okay.
Thank you, Vice President.
talk to him.
I know, but I guess his question, when he asks question like that, it reminds me of Professor Roger Revelle to you. I guess you've been impressed by Professor Roger Revelle and made him
thank
what
you.
you're today, right? So I guess you will ask a question through internet or some else afterwards. You know, interesting enough, at 5 o'clock sharp, we have to send him because he can control the weather, but he cannot control the airplane. So he has to get an airplane at 8 o'clock in the airport. So only we have 4 minutes. So if I will be very, very appreciative if you could make it very
How many
short
of those are you going to use?
How many what? Sorry.
How many minutes?
How many minutes? Oh, I'm sorry. I will cut my.
Okay.
Okay. Next questions. Okay. I think before we did it, somebody. Yuonja, where is Yuonja?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Vice President. My name is Eunja
Short
Yu.
question.
Okay. And I'm majoring in media communication, and I'm really honored to have this opportunity to talk about this global issue with you. My question that I have is regarding the significant challenge of our current society and artificial intelligence. With the appearance of digital revolution and information society, big data and artificial intelligence has become one of the most important terms in this fourth industrial revolution. And AI is now substituting many roles that humans do. So beyond just aiding human beings in analyzing data, it's now being a creative entity. And I think here comes a problem of copyright. So for example, to elaborate, it is now actually possible for AI to actually compose a piece of music. Yeah, and Google already have tried this with a project called Magenta Project, and AI actually did compose a 80 seconds piano music. So in this case, when AI actually creates its own production, I want to ask to whom the copyright of this creative work should go. So should AI have the copyright, or the human being who possesses the machine should have? Thank you.
Now, is that question for?
You know, I have Mr.
No,
President.
no, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I wouldn't have embarrassed you if I'd known you had left the podium. I'm kidding, because the question is actually a very difficult one that I have not heard before. I suppose that one potential answer would be the programmers of the AI, but now artificial intelligence is not only programmed, there are now forms of machine learning that move quickly beyond the original programming. What is your answer to I want to talk a little bit about AI, but what is your answer to that question? You've thought about it more than I have. Who deserves the copyright?
I personally think that since it's a very complicated issue, there is no concrete answer yet, but I also think...
So you decided to ask me.
Yeah. Well, I guess so, but I think there should be a foundation of new laws regarding this huge change and challenge of the society, but I wanted to ask your opinion, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I do appreciate you asking the question. I'll give that some thought, but it's an example of some of these new questions that take us beyond the legal and ethical and moral frameworks in which we have created all of our scholarship and academic learning. And so it will be up to you and your colleagues to help us answer such questions. But let me say a brief word, and I know we're running out of time, but just a brief word about artificial intelligence. Even at a rudimentary level, machine learning is already overturning 200 years of economic theory, which taught us, and the evidence has backed up the proposition, that automation always creates more new jobs than it eliminates. But the addition of intelligence, the extension of cognitive abilities along with physicality, appears to be changing that economic law. It's called the Luddite fallacy, and it may itself now be a fallacy, because the evidence of the last few years seems to indicate that some intelligent automation is bringing about simultaneous changes in multiple fields, so that those whose jobs are displaced in one area go to another and find the same process has been underway there. I hope that this early evidence is not an indication that we face a new challenge to human employment, but some of you have already long since thought a lot about this. And you have this big controversy here in Korea now about regular and irregular workers. We have a similar version of that in the US, the gig economy. And that is connected to the rapid technological transformation of employment in many areas of our civilization. So I think that there is no shortage of work that needs to be done. Child care, family services, mental health care, environmental cleanup, and much of the work that needs desperately to be done is not likely to be automated intelligently or otherwise in the foreseeable future. But we have to develop political and economic and social structures to compensate people for the work that needs to be done, instead of cutting back on investments in children and families and communities and the environment. And it may be that part of the answer to this problem of the effect of AI and intelligent automation on our traditional economies will be to open up new ways to give people opportunities to do new kinds of work in these fields that are desperate for attention, but have been historically compensated at such a low level that people just are not drawn to those fields. In any case, thank you. And may I say, all of these questions speak so well of your university. This is a wonderful experience for me to come here, again, helping to begin your centennial year celebration, but the chance particularly to interact with your students has been a great privilege, and I want to thank you for the honor of coming here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. President, now you play a MC role right there, and you control this audience. No, fortunately, and I thank you, but our president of this university, he made airplane leave 30 minutes later. So we have plenty of time. Okay,
All I control is the weather. You now control the
I see. Okay, then we have one more question. Each of us. Okay. Now, there is one foreign student from other countries. No, I heard there's Cedric. Is he here? Cedric, okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gore. It's a great honor to meet you and to have the opportunity to ask a question here. My name is Cedric Krause and I'm from Germany. And I'm majoring in business information systems. And the question I have is about the digital revolution that, as you said, is supporting the sustainability revolution. And I would like to know from you what you believe the future of the tech industry will look like. Will it be in the hands of a few global players that are able to conduct research and all the great opportunities that come with it, like machine learning, cloud computing, Internet of Things, and many more? So companies like Google or Amazon, or will there be a culture of cooperation between companies, big and small ones, together with groups of people and even individuals, where companies are opening up their organizational boundaries in the sense of open innovation to create value collaboratively through practices like startup competitions, customer co-creation, and similar ones?
Yeah, oh, that's a wonderful question. I'm on the board of Apple, and I look at some similar questions on a regular basis. I guess the best answer to your question is that the outcome between the two choices, the two alternatives you sketched out, the outcome will depend upon the policies and laws that we adopt. If we do not have effective antitrust laws and fair trade laws, then there are tendencies in the digital world for network effects and first mover advantages to build one or two or three huge successful companies in each part of the digital economy. I don't think that's necessarily a healthy outcome, because entrepreneurs and startup companies bring most of the new exciting ideas in the world. But it's important for startup high-tech companies to be able to gain enough scale and enough economic strength to develop the ideas of the founders and the engineers and scientists and technicians without having to constantly worry about being bought up by one of the large behemoths in the field. In fact, this is a current issue in Korea because the debate over the chaebol issues is partly connected to this, because the ingenuity and creativity and technical proficiency of young people in Korea is off the charts. But the structure of your economy, now here I'm going to get into trouble. I should probably stop while I'm ahead. But the structure of your economy does not always allow that creativity to reach the levels of success that would allow these companies to thrive on their own. The same is true in my country in parts of the high-tech world. And increasingly, for example, there is a reluctance to have an IPO, but instead try to get acquired by one of the big companies. So I hope that there will be healthy antitrust laws and fair trading and business practice laws that will shift the advantage to young people who are entrepreneurs and high-tech startup geniuses.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think we must really stop at this moment. Now, before you leave this university, you will never remember the name of this university, Jung-ang University. Jung-ang means in Korean center or core. Though I prefer to use word core. So this university is called Core University. But fortunately enough, it's like your last name, Core and Core. Very similar. Put them together. So when you go back home, remember, you visited Korea. One university in Korea, GORE University. Okay, let's give it. Before we leave, please come forward, student. Take a photo, group photo together. Group photo, please come forward.
마이크만 빼드리고.
자, 엘고 대통령과 사진 찍고 싶은 사람 빨리 나오세요. 학생들 빨리 나와요. 시간이 없어요. 빨리 나오세요. 자, 한 카트 끝입니다. 자, 오케이. Photographers, please. 오케이. 자, 빨리 찍으세요. 자, 그만 이제 됐습니다. 찍으세요. 그만 나오시고. Photographers, 오케이. 수고하셨어요. 자, 됐습니다. 수고하셨어요. And now we'll let him lead to the airport. Okay.
네, 수고했습니다. 아, USB 뺐어. 촬영하시려고요? 아, 진짜 뺐어요?